Cassidy's hands burn with white light as corrupted wolves with pitch-black eyes circle closer. Damien fights desperately beside her, blood streaming down his face. The monstrous alpha at the army's center turns his hollow gaze toward her. One wrong move, and thousands die. Her power is fading. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. The fever had started 3 days ago, and Cassidy knew exactly what it meant. Her first heat was coming, and she was utterly unprepared for it. At 23, she was a late bloomer among omegas. Most experienced their first heat cycle at 18 or 19. But Cassidy had always been different, smaller and weaker than other omegas in the Riverside pack, with a wolf that felt more like a whisper than a presence. She'd been grateful for the delay. Heats were dangerous for unmated omegas, especially in a pack like Riverside, where alphas outnumbered omegas 3-1, and territorial disputes were common. Her parents had died when she was 15, leaving her under the guardianship of her Uncle Thomas, the pack beta. He'd been kind enough, but distant, more focused on pack politics than on raising an orphaned niece. Now, as the fever climbed higher and her skin became hypersensitive to even the softest fabric, Cassidy realized she'd made a terrible mistake. She should have asked for suppressants weeks ago, when the preliminary symptoms started. She should have requested isolation in the Omega Sanctuary. She should have done anything except what she'd actually done, which was pretend everything was fine, and hope the heat would be mild enough to manage on her own. It wasn't mild. The need building inside her was overwhelming, a biological imperative that made rational thought nearly impossible. Every nerve ending felt like it was on fire, and the emptiness low in her belly had become an actual physical ache. She needed an alpha. Her body was screaming for one, demanding to be claimed and filled and satisfied in ways she'd never experienced. Cassidy pressed her face into her pillow, trying to muffle the whimpers that kept escaping despite her best efforts. Her small apartment on the edge of pack territory suddenly felt like a prison. The walls were too close, the air too thick, and worst of all, she could smell them. Every alpha in a half-mile radius, their scents drifting through her open window like a torment, specifically designed to break her. She needed to close the window, needed to block out those scents before they drove her completely insane. But moving required energy she didn't have, and the thought of leaving her nest of blankets and pillows felt impossible. So she stayed curled in a ball, sweating and shaking, and tried to ride out the waves of need that kept crashing over her. A knock on her door made her freeze. Please, she thought desperately, please just go away. She couldn't handle company right now, couldn't handle pretending to be functional when her entire body felt like it was trying to tear itself apart. The knock came again, more insistent. Cassidy, it's Thomas. I need to talk to you. Her uncle. Relief and dread warred in her chest. Thomas would help her, would get her the suppressants she desperately needed, but he'd also be disappointed in her for not handling this better, for letting it get this far without asking for help. I'm sick, she called out, her voice hoarse. Can it wait? No, it can't. Open the door, Cassidy, now. The alpha command in his voice made her body move before her mind could protest. She stumbled to the door, wrapped in a blanket, and cracked it open just enough to see his face. Thomas's expression was grave, and there was another man standing behind him, a man Cassidy had never seen before. He was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they nearly filled the doorway. His hair was dark blonde, almost brown, and his eyes were a striking pale blue that seemed to see right through her. But it was his scent that made Cassidy's knees go weak. Pine and smoke and something wild and untamed that her Omega nature recognized instantly as Apex Alpha. This is Damien Frost, Thomas said, seemingly oblivious to the way Cassidy had started trembling. He's the alpha of the Northern Ridge Pack, and he's here on official business. May we come in?" Every instinct Cassidy had was screaming at her to slam the door, to hide, to get as far away from that massive alpha as possible. He was too big, too powerful, too everything, and she was in preheat, vulnerable and exposed and utterly defenseless. "I'm really not feeling well," Cassidy managed, her fingers white-knuckled on the door frame. "Can we do this another time?" "I'm afraid not," Thomas said, and there was something in his tone that made her stomach drop. "Cassidy, there's been a development, one that requires immediate discussion." The large alpha, Damien, hadn't said a word. He just stood there watching her with those unnerving pale eyes, his nostrils flaring slightly as if he was scenting the air. Could he tell? Could he smell that she was going into heat? The thought made humiliation burn through her, hot and sharp. "Let them in," her wolf whispered, speaking clearly for the first time in days. "He smells right. He smells like safety." Cassidy wanted to argue with her wolf, wanted to point out that a strange alpha who was twice her size was the opposite of safety, but her body was already moving, stepping back and opening the door wider, inviting them into her small space, even as her rational mind screamed warnings. Thomas entered first, his expression still grave. Damien followed, and the moment he crossed her threshold, Cassidy's apartment felt impossibly small. He dominated the space effortlessly, his presence filling every corner until she felt like she couldn't breathe. "Sit down, Cassidy," Thomas said gently. "What I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear." She sank onto her worn couch, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. The fever was getting worse, and having an apex alpha standing 10 feet away was not helping. Her body wanted to go to him, wanted to present herself, and beg for the relief only an alpha could provide. It took every ounce of willpower she had to stay still. 3 weeks ago," Thomas began, "your grandmother passed away." The words didn't make sense at first. "My grandmother? But she died years ago, when I was a child." "Your father's mother died when you were young, yes," Thomas agreed. "But your mother's mother, Elena Whitmore, she was still alive, living in isolation in the northern mountains." Cassidy's head was spinning, and not just from the heat. "I don't understand. Why wouldn't anyone tell me I had a living grandmother?" "Because Elena was exiled from Riverside Pack before you were born," Thomas said, his voice heavy. "She committed a crime against pack law, and Alpha Reynolds showed mercy by allowing her to leave rather than face execution." "What crime?" Cassidy whispered. Thomas exchanged a glance with Damien before answering. She was a seer. She had visions of the future, and she used that knowledge to manipulate pack politics. When she was discovered, she barely escaped with her life. A seer. The word hung in the air like a curse. Seers were rare, maybe one in every 10,000 wolves, and they were almost universally feared and distrusted. Their visions were often cryptic, easily misinterpreted, and those who tried to act on them usually made things worse. "What does this have to do with me?" Cassidy asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "Elena left something in her will," Damien said, speaking for the first time. His voice was deep and rough, like gravel and honey mixed together. "She left a letter and a prediction." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket and held it out. Cassidy's hands shook as she took it, unfolding the yellowed parchment carefully. The handwriting was spidery and elegant, clearly written by someone very old. "To my granddaughter Cassidy," she read aloud, her voice trembling. "If you are reading this, then I have passed beyond the veil, and my final vision has begun to unfold. I have seen your path, child, and it is both terrible and wonderful. You will face a choice that will determine not just your fate, but the fate of every pack in the Northern Territories. And that choice begins with him." Cassidy looked up, her heart pounding. "Him who?" "Keep reading," Damien said quietly. The alpha with eyes like winter ice and a heart that has forgotten how to thaw. He will come to you in your greatest vulnerability, and you will fear him. But you must not run. You must not hide, for he is the key to everything, and without him, the darkness I have seen will consume us all. Trust him. Choose him. Save him. And in doing so, save yourself. The letter fell from Cassidy's nerveless fingers. She looked at Damien, at those pale blue eyes that looked exactly like winter ice, and felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. No, she whispered. No, this can't be real. I'm afraid it is, Thomas said. Elena's visions were never wrong. Whatever she saw, whatever she predicted about you and Alpha Frost, it's going to happen. Visions can be metaphorical, Cassidy protested desperately. They don't have to be literal. Maybe she just meant I'd meet someone important, not that I'd be bound to him somehow. There's more, Damien said, his expression unreadable. Your grandmother didn't just leave a letter. She left a recorded vision, one she had transcribed by a scribe who specialized in seer documentation. Would you like to hear what she saw? Cassidy wanted to say no, wanted to throw them both out of her apartment and pretend this conversation had never happened. But she found herself nodding, unable to deny the morbid curiosity burning through her fear. Damien pulled out his phone and played an audio file. An old woman's voice, cracked with age but still strong, filled the small room. I see a great darkness rising in the north, a rogue army led by an alpha who has touched the old magic, the forbidden power that twists wolf nature into something monstrous. He will sweep down from the mountains like a plague, and pack after pack will fall before him. I see fire and blood, and wolves killing their own kin, turned into mindless beasts by the corruption he spreads. The voice paused, and Cassidy could hear ragged breathing on the recording. But I also see a light, small at first, easily missed. An Omega, with no power and no position, overlooked by everyone who knew her. She stands beside a broken alpha, one who has lost everything he loved and closed himself off from all feeling, and together, somehow, they turn the tide. Her gentleness heals his wounds. His strength protects her vulnerability. And through their bond, through a connection that should never have existed, they forge a weapon that can stand against the darkness. The recording stopped. Cassidy sat frozen, unable to process what she'd just heard. This rogue army, Thomas said quietly, it's real. Reports have been coming in for months. Packs in the far north are going silent, their territories emptied overnight. And the few survivors who've escaped describe exactly what Elena predicted. Wolves turned into mindless killing machines by some kind of corruption. Why are you telling me this? Cassidy asked, her voice barely audible. Why does it matter what my grandmother saw? Because we're running out of time, Damien said bluntly, because in 6 months, maybe less, that rogue army is going to reach the southern territories. And if Elena's vision is accurate, you and I are the only ones who can stop it. That's insane, Cassidy said, her voice rising with hysteria. Look at me. I'm nobody. I can barely control my own wolf. How am I supposed to fight an army? Elena didn't see you fighting, Thomas said gently. She saw you healing. She saw you bringing light to darkness. That's not about physical strength, Cassidy. That's about who you are as a person. And what about him? Cassidy gestured at Damien, anger starting to burn through her fear. What's his role in all this? What makes him the broken alpha that needs fixing? Something flickered across Damien's face, there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. Pain, she realized. Deep, soul-crushing pain that he'd learned to hide behind walls of ice. My pack was attacked 6 months ago, Damien said, his voice completely emotionless, by the vanguard of this rogue army. We fought them off, but the cost was significant. I lost my mate and my son in that attack. They were torn apart in front of me while I was held down and forced to watch. The words hit Cassidy like a physical blow. She'd been so focused on her own fear and confusion that she hadn't considered what this alpha might have already endured. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry for your loss." "Don't be," Damien said coldly. "I don't want sympathy. I want revenge. And if your grandmother's vision is accurate, if somehow bonding with you can give me the strength to destroy the creature that killed my family, then I'll do whatever it takes to make that happen." The casual way he said it, like she was just a tool to be used for his vengeance, sent ice through Cassidy's veins. "You want to bond with me? You want me to be your mate?" "I want to stop the rogue army before it kills anyone else," Damien corrected. "If that requires a bond, then yes. Your grandmother seems certain it was necessary." "She's in heat," Thomas said suddenly, his nose wrinkling. "Cassidy, how long has this been going on?" 3 days, she admitted, humiliation burning through her. "I thought I could manage it alone." "You can't," Thomas said firmly. "You need to go to the Omega Sanctuary immediately. Get suppressants, get isolation before every unmated alpha in the territory catches your scent." "I'll take her," Damien said, his pale eyes fixed on Cassidy. "The sanctuary is on my way back to Northern Ridge. I can make sure she arrives safely." "Absolutely not," Cassidy said, finding her voice. "I'm not going anywhere with you. I don't care what my grandmother's vision said. I don't know you. I don't trust you, and I'm certainly not getting into a vehicle with an apex alpha while I'm in preheat." "I'm not going to hurt you," Damien said, and there was something almost insulted in his tone. "Regardless of what you think of me, I'm not the kind of alpha who takes advantage of vulnerable omegas. You just told me you want to bond with me to use me as a weapon against your enemies," Cassidy shot back. "Forgive me if I don't find that particularly reassuring." "I said I want to stop a rogue army that's killing innocents," Damien corrected, "and I never said I'd force you into anything. Your grandmother's vision suggested we needed to bond. She didn't say it had to happen against your will." "How generous of you," Cassidy said sarcastically, her fear making her reckless, "to allow me the choice of whether or not to tie myself to a complete stranger because a dead woman had a vision." "Cassidy," Thomas said warningly, "Alpha Frost came here as a courtesy. He could have invoked ancient pack law to claim you based on the vision alone. The fact that he's giving you a choice at all shows remarkable restraint." "Ancient pack law?" Cassidy repeated, her voice climbing toward panic. "What ancient pack law?" "When a seer makes a prediction involving specific wolves," Thomas explained reluctantly, "those wolves can be legally bound to fulfill that prediction if it serves the greater good of pack society. It's rarely used anymore, considered outdated and barbaric by most modern packs, but technically it's still enforceable." Cassidy felt the walls closing in. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. She was going into heat. There was a massive alpha standing in her living room claiming they were destined to bond, and apparently there was a legal framework that could force her to comply even if she refused. "I need you to leave," she said, her voice shaking. "Both of you, right now. I can't deal with this." "Cassidy," Thomas started, but Damien held up a hand, cutting him off. "We'll go," Damien said quietly, "but before we do, I want you to understand something. I didn't ask for this any more than you did. The last thing I want is another mate. The last thing I want is to open myself up to that kind of pain again. But Elena's vision wasn't just about us. It was about saving thousands of innocent wolves from a horrible death." He took a step toward her, and Cassidy forced herself not to retreat, even though every instinct was screaming at her to run. "So here's what's going to happen," Damien continued, his pale eyes locked on hers. "You're going to go to the Omega Sanctuary and get suppressants for your heat. You're going to take some time to think about what you've learned today. And in 1 week, I'm going to come back and we're going to have a real conversation about this. Not with your uncle present, not while you're in heat, just the two of us talking like rational adults." "And if I refuse?" Cassidy asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Then I invoke ancient pack law, Damien said bluntly, and you become my mate whether you want to or not. I don't want to do that, Cassidy. I'd much rather have your cooperation. But I will do whatever it takes to stop that rogue army, even if it means becoming the kind of alpha I've always despised. The threat hung in the air between them, cold and unmistakable. Cassidy wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he had no right, but she could see the truth in his eyes. He meant every word. 1 week, she finally said. You get 1 week, but I'm not promising anything. Fair enough, Damien said, and something that might have been respect flickered across his face. Thomas, make sure she gets to the sanctuary safely. I'll return in 7 days. He turned and left without another word, his massive frame disappearing through the doorway like a storm passing. The moment he was gone, Cassidy felt like she could breathe again, though the emptiness his departure left behind was almost as uncomfortable as his presence had been. I'm sorry, Thomas said quietly. I know this isn't fair to you, but Cassidy, Elena's visions were never wrong. If she said you and Damien are meant to bond, there's probably a good reason for it. Even if that reason is just using me as a magical battery for his revenge quest? Cassidy asked bitterly. He's not a bad man, Thomas said. He's just been through something that would have broken most alphas. Losing a mate is hard enough. Losing a child at the same time? That kind of trauma changes you. So I'm supposed to fix him? Cassidy demanded. That's what this is about? I'm supposed to heal the broken alpha and make him whole again? I think you're supposed to help each other, Thomas said. Elena's visions were always about balance, about two halves finding each other. Whatever role you play in stopping this rogue army, it's not going to be one-sided. He moved toward the door, then paused. Get to the sanctuary, Cassidy. Get suppressants, get some rest, and think about what you really want. Not what you're afraid of. Not what you think you should want. What you actually want deep down. After he left, Cassidy sat in silence, her mind racing. The heat symptoms were getting worse, the fever climbing higher, but she barely noticed. All she could think about was pale blue eyes and a dead grandmother's vision and the weight of responsibility she'd never asked for. She made it to the sanctuary just before the heat hit in full force. The Omega coordinator, a kind middle-aged woman named Sarah, took one look at her and immediately ushered her into an isolation room. The suppressants helped, dulling the worst of the symptoms, but they couldn't completely eliminate the ache, the emptiness, the desperate need for something her body insisted only an alpha could provide. For 3 days, Cassidy rode out the heat and misery, her mind tormented by fevered dreams. In those dreams, she saw the things her grandmother had predicted. Wolves with eyes like black pits, their minds consumed by corruption, tearing through pack territory like a plague. She saw fire and blood and heard the screams of the dying. And through it all, she felt his presence, Damien, standing like a wall between her and the darkness, his massive frame absorbing blows that should have killed him, his pale eyes burning with a cold fury that nothing could extinguish. But in those dreams, he wasn't alone. She was there beside him. Though she wasn't fighting, she was doing something else, something she couldn't quite understand. Her hands were glowing with a soft light, and everywhere she touched, the corruption fled. Wolves that had been turned into mindless beasts returned to themselves, their eyes clearing, their humanity restored. It was just a dream, she told herself, just heat-induced hallucinations. But even as she thought it, she knew it felt different. It felt like memory, like prophecy, like truth. On the 4th day, the heat finally broke. Cassidy emerged from isolation feeling hollowed out and exhausted, but at least clear-headed again. Sarah had brought her fresh clothes and a hot meal, and as she sat in the sanctuary's common room eating, she tried to figure out what she was going to do. The logical choice was to refuse, to tell Damien she wanted nothing to do with his quest for revenge, or her grandmother's visions. To live her life as quietly and anonymously as possible, away from prophecies and rogue armies and apex alphas with winter eyes. But she couldn't forget what Elena had said. Without him, the darkness I have seen will consume us all. What if it was true? What if refusing meant condemning thousands of innocent wolves to death? Could she live with that? "You have a visitor," Sarah said, interrupting her thoughts. "He's been waiting outside every day since you arrived, very patient, very polite, but absolutely insistent that he needed to see you the moment your heat broke." Cassidy's heart sank. Big guy? Pale, blue eyes? Looks like he could tear a tree in half? "That's the one," Sarah confirmed with a smile. "He's quite striking. I can see why you'd be interested." "I'm not interested," Cassidy said automatically. "He's here about pack business, not romance." "If you say so," Sarah said, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it for a second. "Should I send him in?" Cassidy wanted to say no, but she'd known this conversation was coming, and there was no point in delaying it further. "Fine, send him in, but stay close, okay? Just in case." "In case of what?" Sarah asked, her expression turning serious. "Has he threatened you?" "No," Cassidy admitted, "but he's an apex alpha I barely know, and I'd feel better having someone nearby." Sarah nodded understandingly. "I'll be right outside. If you need anything, just call." Damien entered the common room a moment later, and Cassidy was struck again by just how large he was. In the sanctuary's modest space, he looked almost comically oversized, like a bear trying to navigate a dollhouse. But he moved with surprising grace, his steps careful and measured, clearly conscious of his own size. "How are you feeling?" he asked, taking a seat across from her. He left a respectful distance between them, she noticed, not crowding her, not trying to intimidate. "Like I've been hit by a truck," Cassidy said honestly, "but the heat's over, so that's something." "Good," Damien said, and there was something that might have been relief in his voice. "I was concerned. Your uncle said it was your first heat. Those can be particularly difficult." "Were you really waiting outside for 3 days?" Cassidy asked, changing the subject. "Yes," Damien said simply. "I told you we needed to talk. I'm not the kind of alpha who makes empty promises." Cassidy studied him, trying to reconcile the ruthless efficiency he'd displayed in her apartment with this patient, almost gentle presence. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why does this matter so much to you? I understand wanting revenge for your family. I understand wanting to stop the rogue army. But why go to all this trouble over a vision? You don't even believe in seer prophecies." "You're right," Damien said. "I don't. Or at least I didn't. Seers have been wrong before. Their visions are cryptic and often misinterpreted. Betting everything on a prophecy seems like madness." "So why are you doing it?" Cassidy pressed. Damien was quiet for a long moment, his pale eyes distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost vulnerable. "Because I have nothing else left. Because every strategy I've tried, every defense I've built, every alliance I've forged has failed. Because that rogue army is coming, and when it arrives, my pack will be wiped out just like all the others. And because your grandmother's vision is the only thing I've encountered that offers even a sliver of hope." He leaned forward, his intensity radiating like heat. "I don't care if it's real or not, Cassidy. I don't care if Elena was a genuine seer or just a delusional old woman. What I care about is that sitting here, talking to you, gives me something I haven't felt in 6 months. It gives me purpose beyond just waiting to die. And I'll chase even the faintest hope if it means I might save the wolves under my protection." The raw honesty in his voice caught Cassidy off guard. This wasn't the cold, calculating alpha from her apartment. This was someone who'd been broken and was desperately trying to find a reason to keep going. "What happened to your family?" she asked quietly. "You said they were killed in the attack, but you didn't explain how." Damien's jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice flat and emotionless, like he was reciting facts about someone else's life. The rogue scouts arrived at night. 15 corrupted wolves, their eyes black as pitch, moving with coordination that shouldn't have been possible. We fought them off, killed most of them, but 3 broke through our defenses. They went straight for the Alpha residence, like they knew exactly where to find me. He paused, his hands clenching into fists. My mate, Sarah, she was a warrior, trained, capable, strong. She held them off while I got our son Marcus to safety, but I wasn't fast enough. They caught us in the hallway. Sarah tried to fight all 3 at once, and I was trying to protect Marcus, and it all happened so quickly. His voice cracked, just slightly. They held me down, made me watch while they tore her apart. She was screaming my name, begging me to save her, and I couldn't move, couldn't shift, couldn't do anything but watch her die. And then they turned on Marcus. He was 6 years old, Cassidy, 6 years old and crying for his mother, and I had to watch them kill him too. Tears were streaming down Cassidy's face before she realized she was crying. She wanted to say something, anything, but what words could possibly be adequate for that kind of loss? When they finally let me go, Damien continued, when the other warriors arrived and drove them off, I wanted to die. I begged the moon goddess to take me too, but she didn't. She left me here, surrounded by the bodies of everyone I loved, with nothing but rage and grief and the certainty that I'd failed as an alpha, as a mate, as a father. He finally looked at her, and the pain in those pale eyes was devastating. So, when your uncle showed up with Elena's vision, with this impossible prophecy about an Omega who could heal what's broken, and an Alpha who could stand against the darkness, I grabbed onto it like a drowning man grabs driftwood, because it's the only thing keeping me from putting a silver bullet through my own skull. Cassidy's breath caught. You're suicidal. I'm surviving, Damien corrected, but I'm not living, and I haven't been since the night I lost them. So, yes, Cassidy, I'm using you. I'm using your grandmother's vision, and this supposed destiny to give myself a reason not to give up, and I'm not going to apologize for that. They sat in silence for a long moment. Cassidy's mind was reeling, trying to process everything she'd just learned. This wasn't just about stopping a rogue army. This was about a broken man trying to find meaning in unimaginable tragedy. I had dreams, she said finally. During my heat, I saw things, the corruption, the rogue wolves, the darkness spreading, and I saw us standing together against it. I saw myself touching corrupted wolves and their eyes clearing, the blackness leaving them. I saw you protecting me while I worked. Damien leaned forward, suddenly intent. You saw yourself healing them, removing the corruption? I don't know if it was really a vision or just heat-induced hallucinations, Cassidy admitted, but it felt real. It felt true. Elena mentioned healing in her recording, Damien said. She said you'd bring light to darkness. Maybe she meant it literally. Maybe your role isn't to fight, but to cure. I'm not a healer, Cassidy protested. I don't have any special powers. I'm just an Omega with a weak wolf. Elena had the sight, Damien said, and that gift often runs in bloodlines. What if you inherited something from her? What if your wolf isn't weak, just different? Cassidy shook her head. That's a lot of what ifs. And even if it's all true, even if I somehow have this healing ability, why would I need to be bonded to you to use it? Protection, Damien said immediately. If you're out there healing corrupted wolves, you'd be vulnerable. You'd need someone to guard you, someone strong enough to handle multiple attackers while you work. An alpha-mate bond would allow me to sense when you're in danger, would give me the drive to protect you above all else. And what do you get out of it? Cassidy asked. Besides a magical healer girlfriend? The ghost of a smile crossed Damien's face. According to Elena, you heal me, not physically, but emotionally. You thaw the frozen heart. You bring me back from the edge. No pressure, Cassidy muttered. I'm not asking you to fix me, Damien said seriously. "I'm not asking you to bear the weight of my trauma. I'm asking you to work with me to stop something terrible from happening. And if, in the process of doing that, we both end up in a better place than we started, then Elena's vision will have been accurate." It was the most reasonable thing he'd said since this entire nightmare began. Cassidy took a deep breath, trying to think through her options logically. Option 1, refuse completely, risk him invoking ancient pack law, end up bonded against her will. That was clearly the worst option. Option 2, agree to work together, see if Elena's vision held any truth, maintain the right to walk away if things went badly. That was at least survivable. Option 3, run. Leave pack territory entirely, disappear into human society, never look back. But that meant abandoning any responsibility she might have to stop the rogue army, and it meant living with the guilt if the vision turned out to be true and she'd refuse to help. "If I agree to this," Cassidy said slowly, "we do it on my terms. No forced bonding. No claiming me without my consent. We work together. We see if this supposed healing ability actually exists, and if at any point I want out, you let me go. No invoking ancient laws, no threatening me, just respect my choice." "Agreed," Damien said without hesitation. "Anything else?" "You tell me everything. No secrets about the rogue army, no hiding information because you think I can't handle it. I'm not a child, and I won't be treated like one." "Fair enough." "And we take time to actually get to know each other," Cassidy continued, gaining confidence. "If we're going to potentially bond, I need to know who you are beyond the traumatized alpha seeking revenge. I need to see if there's a person underneath all that pain worth spending my life with." Something flickered in Damien's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or hope. "You're already thinking about spending your life with me?" "I'm thinking about all possibilities," Cassidy corrected quickly, feeling her cheeks heat. "That doesn't mean I've decided anything." "Of course," Damien said, but there was a hint of warmth in his voice now. "Is there anything else?" Cassidy thought for a moment. "If this healing ability is real, if I can actually help corrupted wolves, then we help everyone we can. Not just your pack, not just wolves you deem worthy. Everyone. No exceptions." "Agreed," Damien said. "In fact, I'd insist on it. Every wolf we can cure is one. Less enemy to face." Cassidy took a deep breath. This was insane. This was the definition of a terrible idea. But she was going to do it anyway, because deep down, she knew her grandmother had been right about one thing. If she refused, if she ran, she'd spend the rest of her life wondering if she could have made a difference. "Okay," she said finally, "I'll work with you. We'll investigate this healing ability, we'll prepare for the rogue army, and we'll see if Elena's vision has any truth to it. But Damien, I need you to understand something. I'm terrified of you, of this prophecy, of the idea that I might have some power I don't understand. So you need to be patient with me. Can you do that?" "I can do that," Damien said softly. "And Cassidy, thank you for giving this a chance, for giving me a chance. I know I'm not easy to be around right now, but I swear I'll do everything in my power to make sure you never regret this decision." As they sat there in the sanctuary common room, Cassidy felt the first stirrings of something she couldn't quite name. Not attraction exactly, though she couldn't deny the alpha was devastatingly handsome. Not trust, because that would take time to build, but maybe possibility, maybe the faint hope that Elena's vision wasn't complete madness after all. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now," Damien said, "you come with me to Northern Ridge." The journey to Northern Ridge took 4 hours by car, winding through mountain passes and dense forests that seemed to grow darker and more primal with every mile. Cassidy watched the landscape change through the passenger window, her anxiety building with each passing moment. She was really doing this, really leaving everything she knew to chase a prophecy with an alpha she barely knew. Damien drove in comfortable silence, occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing brief stories about the territory they were passing through. He seemed different away from the intensity of their earlier conversations. More relaxed, almost approachable, Cassidy found herself stealing glances at him, trying to reconcile the cold, grief-stricken Alpha from the sanctuary with this calmer presence beside her. "Tell me about Northern Ridge," she said finally, needing to break the silence. "What should I expect?" Damien's expression softened slightly. "It's different from Riverside, more traditional in some ways, more progressive in others. We value strength, but we also value compassion. We honor the old ways, but we don't let them blind us to necessary change." "That sounds like a contradiction," Cassidy observed. "Maybe," Damien agreed. "But I've found that the best leadership comes from balancing opposites. Strength without compassion becomes cruelty. Compassion without strength becomes weakness. Tradition without change becomes stagnation. Change without tradition becomes chaos." "Is that your philosophy? Balance?" "It's the philosophy I inherited from my father," Damien said, something wistful crossing his face. "He was a better Alpha than I'll ever be. He knew how to lead with both his head and his heart. I've been trying to follow his example, but after Sarah and Marcus died, I lost the heart part. Now, I just lead with cold calculation." "You're not as cold as you think you are," Cassidy said before she could stop herself. "A truly cold Alpha wouldn't have given me a choice. Wouldn't have waited 3 days outside the sanctuary, wouldn't have shared his pain so honestly." Damien glanced at her, something vulnerable flickering in those pale eyes. "Maybe, or maybe I'm just desperate enough to pretend to be better than I am." "I don't think you're pretending," Cassidy said quietly. "I think you're hurt. There's a difference." They drove in silence for a while longer, but it felt different now. Less tense, more companionable. Cassidy found herself relaxing despite her anxiety, lulled by the steady rhythm of the road and the surprising ease of Damien's company. "Can I ask you something?" Damien said as they approached the Northern Ridge border. "Of course." "Your uncle said you've always had trouble with your wolf, that you couldn't shift, couldn't feel pack bonds clearly. When did that start?" Cassidy thought back, trying to pinpoint when she'd first realized she was different. "I presented as an Omega at 16, but my wolf never fully emerged. Other Omegas described it as this rush of power, this sense of becoming complete. For me, it was just confusion and pain, like something was trying to break free but couldn't quite manage it." "And no one investigated why?" Damien's voice held an edge of disapproval. "The pack healers examined me," Cassidy said defensively. "They said I was just weak, that some wolves are born with defective genetics. They recommended I avoid strenuous activity and accept that I'd never be as strong as other Omegas." "Idiots," Damien muttered. "Defective genetics don't exist in wolves. We're too resilient, too adaptive. If your wolf was suppressed, there was a reason. Elena must have known, must have done something to protect you." "Protect me from what?" "From being discovered," Damien said. "Wolf speakers are rare and valuable, which makes them targets. If you'd shown signs of the gift as a child, before you were strong enough to protect yourself, someone might have tried to use you. Or worse." The thought made Cassidy shiver. "You think my grandmother deliberately suppressed my wolf?" "I think she did whatever was necessary to keep you safe," Damien said. "And now that she's gone, now that you're old enough to handle the truth, the suppression is breaking down. That's why you had those dreams during your heat. The gift is awakening." "If that's true," Cassidy said slowly, "then why now? Why did Elena's death trigger it?" "Seer magic is tied to bloodlines," Damien explained. "When one seer dies, their power often transfers to the next generation. Elena's death might have been the catalyst that broke whatever binding she'd placed on you." They crossed into Northern Ridge territory, passing through a security checkpoint where guards snapped to attention at the sight of Damien's vehicle. The Alpha nodded to them, but didn't stop, driving deeper into forest that seemed to pulse with ancient energy. "We're here," Damien said finally, pulling up to a massive lodge built into the side of a mountain. It was beautiful, all natural stone and timber, seeming to grow out of the landscape rather than being imposed upon it. "Welcome to Northern Ridge, Cassidy. Welcome home." The word home made something twist in Cassidy's chest. She'd never really had a home, not since her parents died. The apartment in Riverside had been shelter, nothing more. But looking at this place, feeling the energy of the territory around her, she felt something settle in her bones. Recognition, maybe, or belonging. Damien led her inside, where pack members immediately began gathering. Cassidy felt overwhelmed by the attention, by the curious stares and whispered conversations. But Damien's hand at the small of her back was steady, grounding. "Everyone," Damien said, his alpha voice cutting through the murmurs. "This is Cassidy Whitmore, granddaughter of Elena the Seer. She's here under my personal protection, and I expect you all to treat her with the respect she deserves." An older woman stepped forward, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Alpha, forgive me, but the pack deserves to know. Is she truly Elena's heir? Does she have the gift?" "We're going to find out," Damien said. "Dr. Reeves, I'll need you to examine her. Run whatever tests are necessary to determine if she carries Seer bloodline markers." "Of course, Alpha." The woman bowed respectfully to Cassidy. "My lady, if you'll come with me?" "Go," Damien said quietly. "I'll have someone show you to your cottage afterward. We'll talk more this evening." The examination took 2 hours and involved more blood tests and energy readings than Cassidy had known were possible. Dr. Reeves was thorough and professional, explaining each procedure as she went, but Cassidy could see the excitement building in the older woman's eyes as the results came in. "Remarkable," Dr. Reeves breathed, studying a readout that meant nothing to Cassidy. "Your bloodline markers are off the charts. You're not just Elena's heir. You're possibly the strongest wolf speaker to emerge in centuries." "But I can't even shift," Cassidy protested. "How can I be strong?" "Your strength isn't physical," Dr. Reeves explained. "It's spiritual, energetic. The wolf speaker gift manifests differently than normal wolf abilities. You don't shift because you don't need to. Your power operates on a different level entirely." "What does that mean practically?" Cassidy asked, her head spinning. "It means," Dr. Reeves said, her expression serious, "that if Elena's vision is accurate, if you truly can heal corrupted wolves, you might be the most important wolf in the Northern Territories. Possibly in all territories." The weight of that statement pressed down on Cassidy like a physical thing. She'd come here hoping to find answers, but each answer just led to more responsibility, more pressure, more expectations she had no idea how to fulfill. "I need to see the Alpha," Dr. Reeves said, gathering her notes. "He'll want to know these results immediately. In the meantime, Beta Marcus will show you to your cottage." A young man with kind eyes and an easy smile appeared at the door. "This way, my lady. Alpha Damien had it prepared for you specifically." The cottage was small but perfect, nestled at the edge of a clearing with a view of mountains that took Cassidy's breath away. Inside, it was warm and welcoming, with a fire already burning in the hearth and fresh flowers on the table. Alpha Damien picked the flowers himself, Marcus said with a slight smile. "He wanted you to feel welcome." Cassidy felt something warm bloom in her chest. The gesture was so at odds with the cold, ruthless persona Damien projected that it made her see him differently, see the man underneath the armor of grief. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." "You're packed now," Marcus said simply, "or you will be once things are formalized, and pack takes care of pack." After he left, Cassidy spent time exploring her new space, trying to process everything that had happened. The cottage had a bedroom, a small kitchen, a cozy living area, and even a bathroom with a large tub. It was more than she'd ever had at Riverside. A knock on the door made her jump. She opened it to find Damien standing there, looking somehow larger in the doorway of the small cottage. "May I come in?" he asked, his formality endearing. "Of course. It's your cottage." "It's your cottage," Damien corrected, stepping inside. "I signed the deed over to you this afternoon. Regardless of what happens between us, this place is yours. You'll always have a home here." Cassidy felt tears prick at her eyes. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," Damien said simply. "I wanted you to know you have options, that you're not trapped." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Damien spoke again. "But Dr. Reeves shared her findings with me." "Ah, you have the gift, Cassidy. The wolf speaker bloodline is strong in you." "She said that," Cassidy agreed, her voice small. "I still don't know what it means." "It means we need to start training," Damien said. "Tomorrow, I'm taking you to see the corrupted wolf we have in containment. We captured one alive during the last attack. If you can heal it, if you can remove the corruption, then we'll know Elena's vision was accurate." Fear spiked through Cassidy. "What if I can't? What if I fail?" "Then we keep trying," Damien said firmly. "We practice, we train, we figure it out together. But Cassidy, I need you to understand something. Even if you can't heal the corruption, even if Elena's vision was wrong, I don't regret bringing you here. You're already making a difference just by being present." "How?" Cassidy asked, genuinely confused. Damien moved closer, his pale eyes intense on hers. "Because for the first time in 6 months, I feel something other than rage and grief. Talking to you, being near you, it makes the darkness recede, just a little. Maybe that's what Elena meant by healing. Maybe it's not about the corruption at all." The vulnerability in his voice made Cassidy's breath catch. She found herself stepping closer, drawn by something she didn't fully understand. "Damien," she whispered, "I'm scared. Scared of failing. Scared of this gift I don't understand. Scared of what I'm starting to feel for you." "I'm scared too," Damien admitted. "Scared of caring again. Scared of losing someone else. Scared that I'm asking too much of you. But Cassidy, I think we're stronger together than apart. I think Elena saw that." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face gently. "I'm not going to rush you. I'm not going to demand more than you can give. But I want you to know that you're not alone in this. Whatever happens, however this unfolds, I'm with you, all the way." Cassidy leaned into his touch, feeling the mate bond that had been quietly forming between them hum with warmth. She wasn't ready to accept it fully, wasn't ready to commit to forever, but maybe she was ready to take the next step. "Stay," she heard herself say, "just for tonight. I don't want to be alone." Damien's expression softened. "Just stay? Nothing more?" "Just stay," Cassidy confirmed. "Talk to me. Help me feel less afraid." So Damien stayed. They sat by the fire, and he told her stories about Northern Ridge, about his childhood, about the wolf he'd been, before grief had hardened him. And Cassidy listened, feeling the walls between them slowly crumbling, replaced by something fragile and new, but unmistakably real. The next morning, Damien took her to the containment facility deep in the mountain. The corrupted wolf was massive, easily twice the size of a normal wolf, with eyes that were pure black without any whites showing. It snarled and snapped at the reinforced cage, its movements jerky and wrong. "We've been studying it for weeks," Damien explained, his voice clinical. "The corruption affects the brain, overriding conscious thought and replacing it with pure aggression. Once turned, wolves attack everything, even their own pack mates. They don't eat, don't sleep, just kill until they're killed." Cassidy stared at the creature, revulsion and pity warring in her chest. "It's suffering." "Yes," Damien agreed, "which is why if you can cure it, you'd be giving it mercy as well as salvation." "I don't know how to start," Cassidy admitted. "Follow your instincts," Damien said. "Your gift is innate. Elena didn't have to be taught. The power just knew what to do. Cassidy approached the cage slowly, her heart pounding. The corrupted wolf lunged at the bars, snapping and snarling, but she forced herself to stay calm. She reached out with her hand, not quite touching the cage, and tried to sense what Elena's gift would feel like. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, she felt it, a warmth building in her chest, spreading down her arms, pooling in her palms. It felt like sunlight, like spring after a long winter, like hope made tangible. "I feel something," she whispered. "Keep going," Damien encouraged, positioning himself protectively behind her. Cassidy let the warmth build until it became almost unbearable. Then, instinctively, she pressed her palm against the cage bars. The corrupted wolf lunged at her hand, and for a moment she thought it would bite her fingers off. But instead, the moment her palm made contact with the creature, light exploded from her hand. It was pure white, brilliant and beautiful, and it flowed from her into the wolf-like water, finding cracks in stone. The creature shrieked, a sound of pain and release combined, and then it collapsed. Cassidy stumbled back, exhausted, and Damien caught her. They both stared at the wolf, which was now lying still in its cage, its sides heaving with normal breath. "Did I kill it?" Cassidy asked, horrified. "No," Damien breathed, his voice filled with awe. "Look at its eyes." Cassidy looked. The wolf's eyes were open, and they were no longer black. They were golden, normal, aware. The creature raised its head weakly and looked at them with recognition rather than mindless fury. "You did it," Damien said, his arms tightening around her. "You actually healed it. Elena's vision was real." Over the following weeks, Cassidy trained relentlessly. Each day, Damien would bring her wolves to practice on, some with minor corruption, others deeply affected. Each healing left her exhausted, but her power grew stronger with practice. She learned to control the flow of energy, to target specific areas of corruption, to work faster and more efficiently. And through it all, her relationship with Damien deepened. He was patient with her training, protective but not overbearing, supportive without being controlling. She saw glimpses of the man he'd been before tragedy struck, saw the alpha who led with both strength and compassion. They spent evenings together, talking by the fire in her cottage or walking through the forest. He told her about Sarah, about the love they'd shared, about Marcus and his dreams for his son's future. And slowly, painfully, he began to let go of the guilt that had been consuming him. "I blamed myself," Damien admitted one night, his voice raw, "for not being faster, not being stronger, for failing to protect them. But you've helped me see that I was fighting something impossible. The corrupted wolves, they're not natural, they're twisted by dark magic. I couldn't have stopped them alone." "You're not alone anymore," Cassidy said softly, taking his hand. "You have me. You have your pack. And together, we're going to stop this." "I'm falling in love with you," Damien said suddenly, his pale eyes intense. "I didn't think I could feel this again, didn't think my heart had anything left to give. But Cassidy, you've brought me back to life. You've made me want to fight for the future instead of just existing in the present." Cassidy's breath caught. She'd felt it too, the pull toward him growing stronger every day. The mate bond was solidifying, demanding recognition, demanding acceptance. "I love you too," she admitted. "I'm terrified of it, terrified of what it means, but I can't deny it anymore. You're not just the alpha in Elena's vision. You're the man I want to spend my life with." Damien pulled her close, kissing her with a passion that stole her breath. The mate bond blazed between them, and Cassidy felt something click into place in her soul. This was right. This was meant to be. "Bond with me?" Damien whispered against her lips. "Truly, completely. Be my mate, my Luna, my everything." "Yes," Cassidy breathed. "Yes, I accept the bond. I choose you." The mating ceremony was held under the full moon, with the entire pack in attendance. Cassidy wore a dress of silver and white, and when Damien marked her, claiming her as his mate before the goddess and the pack, she felt the bond snap into place with perfect certainty. She was his, and he was hers, and together they would face whatever came. But the darkness was coming faster than anyone anticipated. 2 months after Cassidy arrived at Northern Ridge, scouts brought word that the rogue army was moving south. Thousands of corrupted wolves, led by an alpha whose power seemed almost supernatural, were sweeping through pack territories like a plague. "We have 3 weeks," Damien told the assembled pack council, his face grim. 3 weeks to prepare before they reach our borders. After that, we either hold them here or they break through to the southern territories where millions of wolves live unprotected. "Can Cassidy heal them all?" one council member asked. "No," Damien said flatly. "She's strong, but there's a limit to how much energy she can expend. We'd need an army of wolf speakers to cure thousands of corrupted wolves." "Then what do we do?" another member demanded. "We hold the line," Damien said. "We fight, and Cassidy focuses on healing the alpha leading them. If we can cure him, if we can break the source of the corruption, the rest should follow." Cassidy felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. Everything hinged on her ability to reach one wolf, to heal the source of the corruption before it spread further. The night before the attack, Cassidy stood on the balcony of the Alpha residence, which she now shared with Damien, and looked out over the territory. She could feel them coming, could sense the darkness approaching like a storm on the horizon. "Are you ready?" Damien asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "No," Cassidy admitted, "but I'll do it anyway, because this is what I was meant for. This is why Elena saw us together." "We'll face it together," Damien promised. "I'll protect you while you work. Nothing will touch you while I still draw breath." "That's what I'm afraid of," Cassidy said, turning in his arms. "Damien, if it comes down to a choice between saving me and saving the pack, you save the pack. Do you understand? I need you to promise me." "I can't promise that," Damien said fiercely. "You're my mate, Cassidy. You're my life. I won't lose you." "You won't have to," Cassidy said, touching his face gently. "I'm stronger than you think, but I need to know that if something happens to me, you'll keep fighting. You'll protect our pack. You'll survive." "I'll survive," Damien agreed reluctantly, "but only because you're going to survive too. We're both walking away from this, Cassidy. We're going to build the life Elena saw for us." The attack came at dawn, a wave of corrupted wolves crashing against Northern Ridge's defenses like a tsunami. Cassidy stood in a protective circle of Damien's best warriors, her hands already glowing with power, as she reached out to heal every corrupted wolf that came within range. It was exhausting, draining her energy faster than she'd ever experienced. But she kept going, kept pushing through the pain and fatigue, because lives depended on her, because this was her purpose. Damien fought like a demon beside her, his massive form tearing through attackers with savage efficiency. She could feel his determination through their bond, his absolute refusal to let anything reach her. And then she saw him, the source of the corruption, a massive alpha with eyes like black holes and an aura of darkness that made her skin crawl. He stood at the back of the army, directing the corrupted wolves with gestures, his power radiating like poison. "That's him," Cassidy gasped. "That's the one I need to reach. Then we go forward," Damien said grimly. "Warriors, form up. We're pushing through to their leader." It was suicide, and everyone knew it. But Northern Ridge wolves didn't hesitate. They formed a wedge around Cassidy and Damien and charged straight into the heart of the corrupted army. The battle was brutal. Cassidy healed wolves as fast as she could, clearing a path through the corruption, while Damien and the warriors fought with desperate courage. They lost wolves, good wolves who died protecting her, and Cassidy felt each death like a knife to her heart. But they kept moving forward, kept fighting, kept pushing through impossible odds because the alternative was surrender, and Northern Ridge didn't surrender. Finally, they reached him. The corrupted alpha turned his black eyes on Cassidy, and she felt the full force of his power pressing against her mind. He was trying to corrupt her, to turn her into one of his mindless servants. "No," she whispered, pushing back with her own power. "You don't get to win. Not today." She reached out with everything she had, channeling every ounce of energy into one desperate attempt to heal the source of corruption. Light exploded from her hands, pure and brilliant, and slammed into the corrupted alpha with the force of a tidal wave. The creature screamed, a sound of rage and pain and unwinding magic. The darkness around him began to crack, to shatter, to fall away like broken glass. And underneath, she saw him, not a monster, but a wolf who'd been tricked, corrupted, twisted into something he never chose to be. She saw his pain, his confusion, his desperate plea for release. "I'm sorry," Cassidy whispered, pouring more power into the healing. "I'm so sorry this happened to you." The darkness shattered completely, and the corrupted alpha collapsed. His eyes cleared from black to gold, and he looked at Cassidy with awareness and gratitude before his body began to shut down from the trauma of the corruption and its removal. Around them, the corrupted wolves began to fall. Some died immediately, their bodies too damaged to survive without the dark magic sustaining them. Others collapsed and slowly returned to themselves, their eyes clearing, their minds restored. The battle was over. Northern Ridge had held the line. Cassidy collapsed into Damien's arms, completely drained. "Did we win?" she asked weakly. "Yes," Damien said, his voice rough with emotion. "You did it, Cassidy. You saved us all." The aftermath was difficult. They'd lost 37 wolves in the battle, each death a wound on the pack's collective soul. But they'd also saved hundreds of corrupted wolves, giving them a second chance at life. And the corrupted alpha, before he died, had given them information about where the dark magic came from, how it had been created, and how to prevent it from ever being used again. The other packs, hearing what Northern Ridge had accomplished, sent delegations to learn from Cassidy. She began training other wolves with healing gifts, creating a network of healers across the territories. And slowly, the corruption that had plagued the North began to recede. 6 months after the battle, Cassidy stood in front of a memorial stone bearing the names of the wolves who died defending Northern Ridge. Damien stood beside her, his hand in hers, both of them paying their respects. "They gave everything," Cassidy said softly. "They did," Damien agreed, "and we honor them by building the future they died to protect." He turned to face her, his pale eyes warm with love rather than ice. "Elena was right about everything. You healed me, Cassidy. You brought me back from the darkness. You gave me a reason to live instead of just survive." "We healed each other," Cassidy corrected gently. "You gave me purpose, strength, a home. You made me believe I was valuable when everyone else said I was broken." "You were never broken," Damien said fiercely. "You were exactly what the world needed. Exactly what I needed." He dropped to one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. "I know we're already mated. I know the bond is forever. But I want to give you this, a symbol of my commitment, my love, my eternal gratitude for the gift you've given me." He opened the box to reveal a ring, simple and elegant, with a stone that seemed to glow with inner light. "Cassidy Whitmore, Luna of Northern Ridge, love of my life, will you continue this journey with me? Will you help me build a pack where every wolf is valued, where gifts like yours are celebrated rather than feared, where love and strength walk hand in hand?" "Yes," Cassidy said, tears streaming down her face. 1,000 times, yes. He slipped the ring on her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that spoke of love, hope, and new beginnings. Around them, northern ridge wolves who'd gathered for the memorial began to howl, a song of celebration and triumph. The darkness had been defeated. The corruption had been stopped, and in its place, something beautiful was growing. That night, as Cassidy lay in Damien's arms in their shared quarters, she thought about Elena's vision. Her grandmother had seen everything, had known exactly what needed to happen. The Omega with no power had found her strength. The broken Alpha had learned to love again, and together they'd saved thousands of lives. "What are you thinking about?" Damien murmured against her hair. "About how far we've come," Cassidy said. "About how Elena's prophecy wasn't just about stopping the rogue army. It was about two broken people finding each other and becoming whole." "We're not broken anymore," Damien said softly. "We're healed. Together, we're healed." "Together," Cassidy agreed, snuggling closer to her mate, her Alpha, her love. The moon shone through the window, blessing them with her light, and somewhere in the spirit realm, Elena smiled. Her vision had come true. The darkness had been defeated, and most importantly, two souls who'd been lost had found their way home. Years later, when young wolves would ask Luna Cassidy about the great battle, about how she'd discovered her power and saved the Northern Territories, she'd tell them the truth. She'd been terrified, uncertain, convinced she would fail. But she'd had something more powerful than confidence. She'd had love and purpose and a mate who believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. The greatest power, she'd tell them, isn't in fighting or strength or even magic. It's in choosing to stand up even when you're afraid. It's in trusting that you're meant for something greater. And it's in opening your heart to love, even when love has hurt you before. And if some young wolf listening felt their own courage rekindling, if they began to believe that maybe they too could be more than the world expected, then Cassidy knew she'd fulfilled not just Elena's vision, but her own purpose. She'd become not just the wolf speaker who healed corruption, but the Luna who helped others find their own strength. Northern Ridge thrived under Cassidy and Damien's leadership, becoming known across all territories as a place of healing and hope. Corrupted wolves were brought from across the land to be cured, and Cassidy trained dozens of healers to help with the work. The cottage that Damien had given her became a healing center, where wolves came not just for physical healing, but for emotional restoration as well. And through it all, Cassidy and Damien's love only grew stronger. They had children eventually, 3 pups who inherited both their mother's gentle strength and their father's protective nature. And when those pups asked about how their parents met, Damien would smile and say, "It was destiny. Your mother was prophesied," he'd tell them, "chosen by the moon goddess to save us all, and I was lucky enough to be part of her story." "We were part of each other's story," Cassidy would correct, taking his hand, "and we still are. Every day we choose each other. Every day we build our life together. That's not prophecy, that's love." The Omega, who woke up in heat, terrified and alone, had become the most powerful Luna the Northern Territories had ever known. The Alpha, who'd lost everything and wanted to die, had found reasons to live again. And together they proved that Elena's greatest vision wasn't about battles or corruption or magic. It was about 2 broken souls finding each other in the darkness and becoming each other's light. The prophecy had been fulfilled. The darkness had been defeated. And love, as it always does, had won in the end.